Hello, everyone. Today we'll be talking about Generation Z. My name is Aaron Gigley.
My name is Grant Goldberg. Let's get into it. All right, introduction. Generation Z, or Gen Z for short, is the demographic cohort succeeding millennials, which is the Generation Y, and then preceding Generation Alpha, or the next generation. Researchers and popular media used the mid to late 1990s, specifically around 1995 to 1997, as the starting birth years and the early 2010s as the ending birth years. The valuations this generation holds are going to be very crucial for the future of both political and socio-economic changes that will sweep this nation. They are projected to be the most conservative generation since World War II. In fact, in 5 years, they will become a fifth of the workforce. This is mainly a group of people that grew up with wireless technology. For the most part, they don't know VHS what it's like to live in a world without the internet and the wireless technology they have. As a whole, they have very much to bring to the workforce, and they expect much back.
So, who is Gen Z and what are some of their values? Gen Z tend to vote very conservatively. Most of their views politically tend to line up as either libertarians or moderate Republicans. They are a very self-reliant generation, doing their own research instead of just believing what they're told, and they're very, very fiscally conservative. For instance, while most millennials would have chosen to go to an art college, take out student loans, and go to a higher-end college, Generation Z tends to avoid that route, going for jobs that don't require college degrees and avoiding student loans altogether by going to trade schools. They have little to no debt. In fact, they will actually avoid buying houses and instead choose to rent out in order to avoid having to take out a mortgage. 12% of them have already started saving for retirement, and 21% had a savings account set up for them before the age of 10.
Okay, let's look at some differences between Generation Y and Generation Z. For instance, millennials grew up during the economic boom, whereas we grew up during a recession. They tend to be more idealistic, whereas we tend to be very pragmatic. They focus on having experiences, visiting France and the Eiffel Tower, whereas we are very focused on saving money and pushing it towards retirement and having funds for when we do retire. They are very mobile pioneers. They invented phones, they invented the internet, whereas we're natives of that generation. We have all that stuff. They prefer brands that are able to share their values, whereas we prefer brands that are and feel authentic. As for the social media part, they prefer Facebook and Instagram. We actually prefer Snapchat and Instagram. And whereas we were raised by Gen Xers, they were actually raised by the baby boomers. And just to clarify with the dates again, millennials were born around 1980 to 1996, and we were born 1997 to 2010.
So, as you can see by this chart here, it's comparing a lot of major generations and ones that we've been able to get the most information about. The ones I'm going to be talking about is the baby boomers, the millennials, and the zoomers, or Gen Y and Gen Z. So, for social markers, as in some of the biggest events that happened in each generation, the baby boomers had the moon landing. Generation Y had September 11th terrorist attacks in 2001, and Gen Z had the great financial crisis of 2008. Some of the preferred music devices were the audio cassette for boomers, the iPod for millennials, and Spotify for Gen Z. Their preferred leadership styles of each generation. For the boomers, they preferred directing or being the lead on any project. For Gen Y, they preferred a guiding method of leadership or helping out, more of a tutoring type style. And for Gen Z, they preferred more of an empowering leadership style, where they set everybody else up, and instead of leading them or helping them, they let them do their own thing. The ideal leader for each generation, for the boomers, would be more of a thinker, somebody who comes off as intelligent and wise. For Gen Y or millennials, they prefer a supportive leader, somebody who's willing to help you out. And for Gen Z, they prefer more of a collaborator leader, somebody who's willing to get his hands dirty or her hands dirty and work with you. For the learning style, baby boomers prefer more of a structured learning style. Millennials prefer more of an interactive style, and Gen Z prefer a multi-model style, where they'll take the best of all the other learning styles and kind of mash them together. The best influence/advice sources for each generation would be experts for baby boomers. They prefer it when somebody, or they feel like somebody knows what they're talking about. For millennials, they prefer peers. So instead of hearing from an expert, if their friends have actually been through it, they'd like to hear from them first. And for Gen Z, they prefer forums. As they're a very independent, self-research generation, they would like to go online to something like Reddit and see what people have to say about different topics to get a bunch of opinions. The best marketing mode would be mass broadcast for baby boomers, the generation single-handedly keeping radio alive. Gen Y, they prefer online linked media, which would mean news articles or websites. And for Gen Z, they prefer digital social media, which would mean things like, say they go to a website and it has no comments, they wouldn't care. But if there were comments on a website, or if an Instagram influencer was talking about something, or there was some kind of engagement going on about the product, they would be much more open to it.
All right. Let's get into focusing your marketing on Gen Z. So this chart shows like how and when Gen Z would stop using a service or product, because they want it now. They have very short attention spans. So for the first one here, poorly designed mobile features. Give you example, it's when you have an app and there's too many pop-ups ads and every 30 seconds there's an ad. Gen Z just doesn't want to deal with that. They'd rather delete the app, find another app that's maybe free and doesn't have as many ads on it, and use that one. So you can see the 23% versus the millennials there at 16%. Slow online chat response for sales and issues. An example of that is if you go to a website like JCPenney or Forever 21, and they have the little chat box of how can we help you today? And they really are interactive with a faster response time when they're typing what they want. If the sales representative or the automated service on the other end is just too slow, they're not going to want to deal with that. So they'd rather just shop on their own or look it up on their own time. As far as poor features and the responsiveness to social media, as we looked at the other slide, the millennials are very focused on linked articles online. They'd rather look at an article and then form their biased opinion based off of whatever the article's saying. Whereas Gen Z, it clearly shows that they would rather look at the comments and look at who's talking about the article and who's giving the review, and then base on and form their own opinion on that. And then the last one here you can see are very similar between both generations. They really just don't like having to do customer service in store or by phone. They really want an application or a faster service there.
So, in conclusion, and to reiterate, Gen Z is heavily focused on marketing based around technology. Phone calls and in-person meetings are far less important to Gen Z that have the information online or promoted by other people, like Instagram influencers. So, in this age of the influencer, it's more about letting them trust the product using others than it is targeting them directly. For instance, if you were to go out and sponsor a popular YouTuber, Gen Z would be far more open to buying your product than if you just came up with an advertisement campaign trying to target Gen Z. Gen Z also need quick response time when it comes to customer service. If you can't respond to them and answer their questions, they will either move to another product or they will very quickly do some research on their own and take other people's opinions of their products over what you would have to say about it. This generation is focused on being more independent and love doing their own research. As such, the best way to reach out to them is using quick and easy to digest information that promotes conversation. So they say no press is bad press, no press is bad press. So as long as you're going to give a product that sparks some kind of dialogue in Gen Z, you should have success with it. It's been a presentation on some of the ways you can best reach out to Generation Z.